From Granite State Report, independent New Hampshire journalism, out of Northfield. The male victim's New Hampshire doesn't count. Nearly half of American men report psychological abuse by a partner. Federal data says the person inflicting it is usually a woman, and New Hampshire law now names coercive control for what it is. Yet the state still treats a battered man as a punchline. By Dexter Dow. July 9, 2026. Nearly half of American men, 48.8%, have been on the receiving end of psychological aggression from an intimate partner at some point in their lives. That is the federal government's own figure from the National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey. The number for women is 48.4%. The two are, for every practical purpose, the same. One of them gets read into legislation, printed on brochures, and repeated at rallies. The other sits in a CDC table almost nobody opens. New Hampshire spent the last year widening what its domestic violence law will recognize as abuse. Since January 1st, coercive control, the slow and deliberate work of monitoring, isolating, humiliating, and controlling another person, has been written into the state's protective order statute, RSA 173B. The statute is indifferent to the sex of the victim. The world around it is not. A man being hollowed out by a controlling partner in Laconia or Franklin can walk into the same courthouse, cite the same law, and win the same order as anyone else. Most never will, because everything outside that courthouse has told him he is either lying or a joke. This is not a claim that men have it worse. They do not. Women are harmed more often, more severely, and with far deadlier results, and the numbers here say so without flinching. It is a claim that a system built to see one kind of victim has trained itself not to see the other, and that the price of the blind spot is paid by real people in this state. The number nobody repeats. Start with the scale. More than 1 in 6 men in the United States, about 20.7 million, have been subjected to contact sexual violence, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime, according to the CDC's most recent survey data. Roughly 1 in 7 men have faced physical violence from a partner. About 1 in 8 men have survived that kind of abuse and carried at least one lasting effect from it. Injury, fear for their safety, a night in the hospital, symptoms of post-traumatic stress. Then the piece the public conversation skips entirely. When the CDC asks who is doing this to men, its own answer, in category after category, is women. Roughly 1 in 14 men has been forced to penetrate someone against his will. Of those men, 79% reported only female perpetrators. Among men who were sexually coerced, 82% named only women. Among men who suffered rape, physical violence, or stalking specifically at the hands of an intimate partner, 97% had only female perpetrators. These are not talking points from an advocacy shop. They are the National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey, run by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. None of it erases the larger truth that women bear the heavier load of intimate partner violence. Both facts fit in the same sentence. A man can be a rare kind of victim and a real one at the same time. What coercive control is? The 48.8% figure is not about bruises. The CDC files it under psychological aggression, which it splits into 2 halves. First, expressive aggression, the name-calling, the humiliation, the being made small in front of other people. Second, coercive control, the behavior meant to monitor, isolate, and dominate. Cutting a partner off from friends and family, tracking his phone and his money, deciding where he can go and who he can see, threats held over his head to keep him compliant. It is abuse designed to leave nothing a camera can capture. Faced with a partner like that, the instinct is to reach for a label. She's a narcissist, he married a sociopath. This is where accuracy earns its keep. Sociopath is not a clinical diagnosis. The manual calls it antisocial personality disorder, and most people who abuse a partner do not have it. The strongest recent research is more careful and more useful than the pop psychology version. A 2025 study in the journal Personality and Mental Health by Nicholas Day and colleagues found that pathological narcissism was only weakly tied to coercive control and not directly tied to abuse at all. What moved the needle was the severity of personality dysfunction. Among partners already high in narcissistic traits, the more disordered their functioning, the more coercive control and violence appeared. Translation: no diagnosis reliably predicts an abuser. What predicts harm is the pattern of control itself, and deep personality pathology raises the odds without being the whole story. That pattern is not a male trait. Women run it too, and the CDC data on who abuses men says they run it often. The law caught up. The state started counting. On paper, New Hampshire has already fixed the part it can fix. House Bill 62, sponsored by 5 Republicans and signed by Governor Kelly Ayotte on June 2, 2025, took effect this January as Chapter 55. Among other changes, it added coercive control to the list of acts that qualify as abuse under the state's Civil Protective Order law, and, for the first time, defined the term in statute. That definition, a pattern of threatening, humiliating, or intimidating acts that harm, punish, or frighten a person and interfere with their free will and personal liberty. The wording matters. The abuse definition reaches conduct by a current or former partner or a household member, and the chapter opens by declaring that any person may seek relief. There is no filing fee. A judge can order no contact, order the abuser to stay away from home and work, order firearms surrendered, and set temporary custody, with a final order lasting up to a year and enforceable in any state. A man qualifies on the same terms as a woman. He always did. Now the statute names the specific harm most likely to be used against him. Be honest about the friction, too. The judicial branch's own fiscal note on House Bill 62 warned that widening the statute to include coercive control would mean more hearings and more litigation over exactly what the term covers. The definition will be tested case by case, which is how new law usually works. And for anyone bracing to argue that recognizing male victims throws open the door to fake claims, the same chapter makes filing a petition with false allegations of abuse a crime. The guardrail is already in the text. Lawmakers were not done, either. A broader coercive control expansion, House Bill 1522, passed the House by voice vote this spring, according to reporting by the New Hampshire Bulletin, though its fate for the session remains unsettled. Why men don't call? The law is the easy part. The reason those 20.7 million men are largely invisible has almost nothing to do with statutes, and almost everything to do with what happens when a man opens his mouth. Research on male victims, led in the United States by Denise Hines and Emily Douglas, and echoed by studies out of the United Kingdom and Europe, keeps landing on the same wall. Men are less likely than women to seek help at all. Shame, fear of ridicule, and the drilled-in belief that a man should be able to handle his own house keep most of them silent. When they do reach out, too many are treated as suspects. In studies of men who sought help, participants described being asked what they had done to provoke the violence, the assumption sliding, before anyone checked, from victim to instigator. A man who calls for help and gets interrogated learns the lesson fast: stay quiet. The damage is not abstract. In Hines and Douglas's sample of men who sought help for partner abuse, almost 60% scored above a clinical cutoff for post-traumatic stress disorder. Their work, and a 2025 research review, link male victimization to depression, high blood pressure, heavier drinking and drug use, and suicidal thinking. The review found the deepest wounds ran through fatherhood, men describing false accusations of abuse or being cut off from their children as a tactic of control. And the culture keeps the wound open by treating a battered man as comedy, which teaches the next one to keep his mouth shut. This is not a zero-sum fight. None of this takes anything from women. The federal picture is unambiguous that women are the majority of intimate partner violence victims and absorb the worst of it, and any honest account has to say so. Recognizing male victims does not move $1, one shelter bed, or one advocate away from the women who need them. New Hampshire's 12 crisis centers already provide free, confidential services to all victims and survivors. The statute already protects everyone. The gap is not in the law or the funding. It is in the reflex. It is the officer, the neighbor, the friend who hears a man say his wife controls the money, tracks his phone, and screams him down until he apologizes for things he did not do. and files it under henpecked instead of coerced. New Hampshire changed the words on January 1st. Whether anyone listens when a man finally uses them is the next test, and it gets answered one courthouse, one crisis line, one returned phone call at a time. If this is your relationship, help exists. New Beginnings, in Laconia, runs a free, confidential crisis line for the Lakes region at 1-866-841-6247. New Hampshire's statewide domestic and sexual violence helpline is 1-866-644-3574. The National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-7233, and RANN, 1-800-656-4673, take calls from anyone, of any gender, around the clock. If you are in immediate danger, call 911. The state finally has a word for what is being done to these men. The men are still waiting for the rest of us to use it. That was an editorial by Dexter Dow for Granite State Report. This article was read by a synthetic voice. For the full fact check, every source, and a way to weigh in, read the complete piece at graniteestatereport.com.